The null realm was not merely silent. It was the graveyard of sound. Here, in the infinite white expanse where the tournament of power had once raged, and where the multiverse had begun to fracture, there was now only a suffocating stillness. The Grand Priest stood floating in the nothingness, his hands clasped behind his back, his violet eyes fixed on the tier in reality where Son Goku had vanished. For eons, the Grand Priest had known the precise weight of every atom in the multiverse. He knew the vibration of every soul, the trajectory of every destiny. But now, for the first time since the dawn of the angelic hierarchy, there was a variable he could not calculate. The tear in space did not close, it crystallized. A sound began to hum. Not a roar of ki nor the divine chant of a god, but the high-pitched singing resonance of glass under immense pressure. The void around the tear began to harden, turning from formless white to a prism of impossible geometry. Whis, standing slightly behind his father, felt a shiver crawl up his spine, a sensation an angel should never feel. It was not fear. It was the biological rejection of something that defied the laws of their creation. The prism shattered. There was no explosion, no shock wave. The shards simply dissolved into stardust, revealing a figure standing in the center. It was Goku, but the man who stood there possessed a stillness that made the surrounding void feel chaotic. His GI was gone, replaced by the raw, shifting texture of light itself. His hair did not flow with the wind of battle. It hung suspended, rigid, and glittering like carved diamond. He opened his eyes, and the silver iris of ultra instinct was gone. In its place was a geometry of absolute terrifying clarity. The Grand Priest's smile faltered. His fingers twitched, a microscopic betrayal of his composure. The pressure emanating from the Saiyan was not divine energy. It was the absence of it. It was a power that felt ancient, older than the hierarchy, older than the throne of Zeno. Goku took one step forward, and the null realm, a dimension of infinite nothingness, creaked under the weight of his existence. To witness the birth of a power that terrifies the gods, anchor your spirit to this timeline before the truth shatters everything you thought you knew. The silence of the null realm was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that covered the wreckage of the tournament arena. It was not merely the absence of noise, it was the cessation of vibration, a vacuum where sound had surrendered to the weight of the moment. The Grand Priest hovered in the void, his small stature betraying the monumental, crushing density of his presence. His hands remained clasped behind his back, his posture impeccable, but his eyes, violet, ancient, and usually devoid of surprise, were narrowed. He was staring at a singular point in the emptiness, a tear in the fabric of the dimension where a mortal had willingly stepped into erasure. Beside him, Whis stood with his staff held loosely in his grip, though his knuckles were white. The Angel of Universe 7, usually a master of detachment and whimsical observation, felt a coldness permeating his being that had nothing to do with the temperature of the void. It was a spiritual chill, a frequency of dread that vibrated against the very core of his angelic nature. They were waiting for a death. They were waiting for the final dissipation of Son Goku's energy, the confirmation that the Saiyan had been unmade by the collapse of the core. But the energy did not dissipate, it calcified. The tear in reality, jagged and unstable, suddenly ceased its chaotic fluctuation. It froze. Then, with a sound that resembled the cracking of a glacier across a silent planet, the void around the tear began to harden. It turned from the swirling, bruised purple of the null realm into a translucent, geometric structure. It was a prism, vast and complex, floating in the nothingness, refracting light that did not exist. The Grand Priest felt the air pressure drop to absolute zero. This was not the work of Zeno. This was not the work of the Super Dragon Balls. This was a rewriting of the local physics, a forced imposition of order upon chaos. "Father," Whis whispered, his voice sounding thin and fragile in the oppressive atmosphere. The reading. It isn't Kai. It isn't divine energy. It feels like the foundation. The Grand Priest did not answer. He could not. For the first time in eons, his omniscient understanding of the multiverse had hit a wall. He watched as the prism began to hum, a low, resonant frequency that made the halo around his neck vibrate in sympathy. The structure was perfect. Mathematically, terrifiedly perfect. It had no flaws, no rough edges, no organic inconsistency. It was a cage of diamond light. Then the prism shattered. There was no explosion, no violent expulsion of debris. The shards of the geometric structure simply dissolved into fine, glittering dust, cascading downward like a curtain of falling stars. And there, standing upon a platform of invisible solidity, was the entity that used to be Son Goku. He stood with his back to them at first, his posture unnaturally straight. The tattered orange GI that had become a symbol of his relentless, messy struggle was gone. In its place, his body seemed to be wrapped in a material that shifted between fabric and light, a flowing raiment of pale, crystalline blue that clung to him like a second skin. But it was his physical form that stole the breath from Whis's lungs. Goku turned slowly. The movement was not fluid in the way a martial artist moves. It was fluid in the way water flows, inevitable, frictionless, and terrifyingly precise. His skin possessed the sheen of polished marble, pale and flawless, glowing with a faint, internal luminescence. His musculature was defined, but the rugged, battle-hardened bulk of the Saiyan warrior had been streamlined into something sleek and divine. His hair, once the wild jet-black mane that defied gravity, was now suspended in a rigid, crystalline state. It was white, but not the white of ultra instinct. This was the white of a diamond heart, refracting the darkness of the void into spectra of blinding color. Goku opened his eyes. Whis took an involuntary step back. The warm, dark eyes of the Saiyan, usually full of naivety and kindness, were gone. The silver intensity of the ultra-instinct state was also absent. In their place were eyes of faceted diamond, multi-layered, profound, and utterly alien. They did not look at the Grand Priest. They looked through him, decomposing his existence into data, into intent, into history. "Goku!" Whis called out, the name feeling like a question addressed to a stranger. The entity tilted his head. The motion was sharp, mechanical yet graceful, like the ticking of a cosmic clock. When he spoke, the voice was Goku's, but stripped of all its cadence, all its rural roughness. It was a voice layered with a harmonic reverb, sounding as if three people were speaking in perfect unison. "That name is recorded in the memory of this vessel," the entity said. The words did not travel through the air. They manifested directly in the minds of the angels. But the function has changed. The Grand Priest unclasped his hands. The smile he wore was now tight, a mask straining against the confusion beneath. "Function?" he asked, his tone polite but laced with the threat of absolute authority. "You speak as if you are a mechanism, Son Goku. You stepped into erasure. By all laws of the cosmos, you should not exist. Who reconstructed you?" Goku looked at his own hands. They were translucent, the bone structure visible beneath the skin like veins of silver light. He flexed his fingers, and the space around his hand rippled, small fractures appearing in reality before sealing themselves instantly. "I was not reconstructed," Goku replied, his diamond eyes fixing on the Grand Priest. "I was corrected." The word hung in the void, heavier than a galaxy. Corrected. It implied that his previous existence, his mortality, his Saiyan heritage, his very soul, had been a mistake, a flaw in the design. Corrected by whom? The Grand Priest pressed, his halo beginning to glow with a faint, warning light. He was preparing to erase this anomaly if necessary. No being, mortal or god, stood above the hierarchy of the angels. Goku lowered his hand. The air around him hardened, forming a visible aura of jagged crystalline spikes that rotated slowly. He did not take a fighting stance. He simply existed, and his existence pushed against the Grand Priest's authority like a rising ocean pushing against a fragile dam. "By the one who remembers what you have forgotten," Goku said. For a heartbeat, the Grand Priest's eyes widened. A flicker of genuine shock, perhaps even fear, darted across his face. It was a microscopic reaction, invisible to any mortal. But to Whis, it was a scream. The Grand Priest knew. He recognized the signature now. It wasn't just power, it was the original code. "Impossible," the Grand Priest whispered, the word escaping him before he could check it. Goku took one step forward. The null realm shook. It was not a physical tremor, but a structural one, as if the simulation of reality was struggling to render the mass of the being now walking through it. "The balance was broken," Goku stated, his voice devoid of anger, devoid of judgment, simply stating a fact as cold as the void itself. "I have returned to stabilize the collapse. You are drifting, Grand Priest, and I am here to anchor you." The Grand Priest's halo flared. It was a reflex, an instinctual defense mechanism triggered by a statement that bordered on heresy. To be told he was drifting by a being born of mortal blood was an impossibility that his mind refused to process, yet the evidence stood before him, shimmering in terrifying clarity. "Anchor me." The Grand Priest's voice dropped an octave, losing its polite veneer. The atmosphere of the null realm grew heavy, the pressure increasing until it felt as though gravity had increased 1,000-fold. "You assume a position, Son Goku, that does not belong to you. You are a mortal who has touched the divine, nothing more. Do not mistake a temporary reprieve from death for ascension." He raised a single finger. It was the gesture that had ended conflicts, silenced gods, and erased timelines. A sphere of erasure energy, small and purple, materialized at the tip of his finger. It was destruction distilled to its purest form. "Sleep," the Grand Priest commanded. The sphere launched. It moved faster than time, a concept that had little meaning here but served as the only metric for its inevitable speed. It struck Goku squarely in the chest. Whis flinched. He expected the erasure to take hold, for the diamond skin to dissolve into purple smoke, for the anomaly to be corrected, but the smoke never came. The sphere of erasure struck Goku's chest and chimed. It was a sound like a crystal bell struck by a silver hammer. The purple energy of erasure did not consume Goku, it shattered against him. The sphere broke into 1,000,000 tiny fragments of harmless light, scattering across the surface of his diamond-like skin before fading into nothingness. Goku had not blocked it. He had not dodged it. He had simply been incompatible with it. The Grand Priest's hand remained raised, his finger pointing at a target that was no longer subject to his rules. For the first time in recorded history, the Grand Priest lowered his hand slowly, not in mercy, but in caution. "Interesting," the Grand Priest murmured, though his eyes betrayed a storm of calculation. Goku looked down at his chest, where the erasure energy had impacted. There was not even a scratch on the pale, luminescent surface of his skin. He brushed the area lightly, a gesture so human yet performed with such robotic stiffness that it felt uncanny. "Your erasure targets the chaotic elements of existence," Goku said. His voice was still that harmonic layering of tones, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "It deletes that which does not fit the pattern, but I am no longer chaotic. I am the pattern." He looked up, and for a fleeting second the diamond facets of his eyes shifted, revealing a depth that made Whis feel vertigo. "I can hear them," Goku said suddenly. "Hear whom?" Whis asked, stepping forward, his curiosity warring with his unease. "The universes," Goku replied. "Not the voices of the people, the structures. I hear the friction of Universe 6 rubbing against Universe 7. I hear the strain of the time rings. I hear the silence of the universes you erased." He turned his gaze to the Grand Priest. "It is loud. It is screaming." Suddenly, the void above them ripped open. It was the arrival of the Omni Kings. The two Xenos floated down, their colorful, childish forms usually bringing a sense of terrifying whimsy to any scene. They drifted toward the platform, giggling, oblivious to the tension that was strangling the angels. "Goku!" the present Xeno cheered, raising his small arms. "Goku is back!" The future Xeno echoed. "Hey, hey, play with us!" They floated toward the diamond figure, expecting the usual warm, goofy greeting, the high five, the casual disrespect that only Goku could get away with. But as they drew closer, they slowed down. The giggles faded. The Xenos stopped 5 feet away from Goku. They hovered there, their blank oval eyes widening. Animals often sense an earthquake before it happens. The Xenos, in their primal, absolute connection to reality, sensed the shift in the hierarchy before the angels did. Goku looked at them. He did not smile, he did not wave, he did not say, "Yo." He slowly lowered himself to one knee. It was a bow of perfect mechanical reverence. It was the bow of a knight to a king, or perhaps a guardian to a charge. "Omni Kings," Goku said. The warmth was gone. The familiarity was dead. "Your safety is the priority. The structure must be maintained." The Xenos looked at each other, confused. This was not their friend. This was something else. "Goku is shiny?" the present Xeno whispered. "Goku is cold," the future Xeno added. "Why aren't you funny?" the present Xeno asked, floating a little closer, poking Goku's diamond hair. The hair did not bend. It was hard as stone. "You feel like the floor." "I am what is required," Goku answered, rising smoothly to his feet. The Grand Priest watched this interaction with a darkening expression. Goku's submission to Xeno should have pleased him. It was the proper order of things, but this submission felt wrong. It wasn't the submission of a subject to a ruler, it was the submission of a logic gate to a command line. It was functional, not deferential. And more terrifyingly, it implied that Goku now viewed himself as a part of the system's architecture. "You have been altered fundamentally," Whis said, his voice soft, tinged with a rare sadness. "Goku? Is there anything of you left in there? The Saiyan who fought for the thrill? The father?" Goku turned to Whis. The diamond eyes seemed to rotate, focusing with microscopic precision. "Memories exist," Goku stated. "Data is preserved, but the emotional bias has been removed. It was deemed inefficient." "Inefficient?" Whis repeated, his grip tightening on his staff. "Emotion was the source of your power. It was the trigger for the Super Saiyan. It was the fuel for your will. It was the source of instability," Goku corrected him. He raised a hand, and a small, perfect cube of light materialized above his palm. It rotated silently. "Anger, sorrow, desire, these are fluctuations. They cause errors in judgment. They endanger the multiverse. To save Xeno, to save the core, the fluctuations had to be excised." He closed his hand and the cube vanished. "I am the Diamond Angel," Goku declared, the title ringing out like a judgment. "I do not feel. I function. And my function is to ensure that the Grand Priest does not make another mistake." The Grand Priest's eyes narrowed to slits. The accusation was open now. The war of words was over. "You overstep," the Grand Priest said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. "I am the Father of Angels. I am the advisor to the One above all. You are a biological curiosity that I have tolerated for exactly 3 minutes too long." The Grand Priest levitated higher, his aura finally flaring. It was not the white aura of the angels, but a deep royal violet that screamed of authority. "If you believe yourself to be an angel," the Grand Priest said, "then let us see if you can withstand the judgment of one." Goku did not power up. He did not shout. He simply adjusted his stance, his feet shifting a fraction of an inch. The movement caused the entire null realm to groan. "Judgment requires authority," Goku said calmly, "and yours is under review." The null realm, infinite and unchanging, had never known wind. Yet, a gale was blowing now, a psychic hurricane generated solely by the rising pressure of the Grand Priest's intent. The violet aura surrounding the High Angel did not flicker like fire. It poured like liquid silk, dense and heavy, cascading off his shoulders and flooding the platform. The Xenos floated backward, their small hands clutching each other, their childlike eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and unease. They had seen destroyers fight. They had seen universes erased, but they had never seen the Grand Priest prepare for war. "Reviewing my authority," the Grand Priest repeated softly. The words sounded like grinding stones. "You speak of order, Son Goku. Let me show you the crushing weight of it." He did not rush forward. An entity of his level had no need for velocity. He simply expanded his will. Hundreds of halos, rings of incandescent white light, materialized from the void. They were not mere constructs of energy. They were the physical manifestations of angelic law. These were the binding rings used to restrain rogue destroyers, the chains that held galaxies in their orbits. With a subtle twitch of the Grand Priest's finger, the halos snapped shut around Goku. They clamped onto his wrists, his ankles, his neck, and his torso. The air screamed as the rings contracted, designed to immobilize the target, not just in space, but in time. Under this bind, a being could not move, could not think, could not even age. Whis watched, holding his breath. He knew the strength of the angelic bind. Even he would require significant effort to shatter one. Goku was wrapped in hundreds. But Goku did not struggle. He did not flare his kai to burst them. He simply walked. The sound was nauseating. A high-pitched screech of reality tearing against itself. As Goku took a step, the halos did not break. They slid. They passed through his diamond skin as if he were a ghost. Or perhaps as if the halos themselves were the illusion. He walked through the absolute laws of the Grand Priest like a man walking through cobwebs. "Structure requires consent," Goku said, his voice echoing with that triple-layered harmonic. "I do not consent to your restraints." He stepped free of the final halo, and as his foot touched the ground, the rings behind him turned gray and crumbled into dust. They hadn't just been broken. Their definition had been deleted. The Grand Priest's eyes widened a fraction more. The composure was cracking. The mask of the benevolent advisor was slipping, revealing the terrifying, cold intelligence beneath. He reached out with his right hand, and his staff, the scepter of his office, the floating blue ring atop a dark rod, teleported into his grip. "If you will not be bound," the Grand Priest hissed, "then you will be analyzed and dismantled." He spun the staff, the blue orb glowing with omniscient light. This was the ultimate tool of the angels. It could see into the past of any timeline, predict the future of any civilization, and locate any atom in the multiverse. The Grand Priest thrust the staff forward, aiming the orb directly at Goku. "Reveal his flaw," he commanded the artifact. "Show me the fracture point in his structure." The orb swirled. Usually it would display a clear image, a biological schematic, a flow of kai, a weakness in the soul. But as the Grand Priest gazed into the crystal, he saw nothing. Not blackness, not emptiness. He saw static. Jagged, violent, gray and white static clawed across the surface of the divine orb. It was a glitch, a blind spot. The staff began to vibrate violently in his hand, the metal heating up as it tried and failed to render the existence of the being before it. "He is not there," Whis whispered, realizing the horror of what he was seeing. "Father, the staff cannot see him. He has no timeline. He has no future to predict." Goku continued his slow, rhythmic walk toward the Grand Priest. He was closing the distance. "Your tools gaze upon the flow of time," Goku said, his diamond eyes never blinking. "I am no longer in the river. I am the rock that splits it." The Grand Priest snarled, a sound so uncharacteristic it sent a shockwave through the void. He slammed the staff into the ground, cracking the indestructible floor of the null realm. "Enough." The Grand Priest vanished. To a mortal eye, he would have simply disappeared. To a god of destruction, he would have been a blur. But to Whis, the movement was clear, though terrifyingly fast. The Grand Priest had moved through the gaps between seconds, appearing instantly behind Goku. His hand was formed into a knife edge, glowing with an energy so concentrated it appeared black. This was an execution strike aimed at the base of the neck to sever the link between the soul and the body. It connected. Clang. The sound was not of flesh being struck. It was the sound of a hammer hitting an anvil the size of a planet. The Grand Priest's hand stopped dead against the side of Goku's neck. The impact should have severed Goku's head. It should have shattered the timeline, but Goku hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched. The diamond skin at the point of impact hadn't even cracked. Instead, the force of the blow reverberated backward. The Grand Priest gasped as the kinetic energy of his own strike, rejected by Goku's form, traveled back up his arm. His sleeve disintegrated. The blue skin of his forearm rippled as the bones inside groaned under the stress. He kicked off the air, retreating instantly to create distance, clutching his trembling arm. For the first time in the history of the cosmos, the Grand Priest was hurt. Goku turned slowly. He raised a hand to his neck, brushing the spot where the strike had landed. Violence, Goku stated, is an inefficient method of communication. It reveals your desperation, Grand Priest. What are you? The Grand Priest breathed, staring at his own hand, watching the tremors he could not control. You are not a Saiyan. You are not an angel. You are an aberration. I am the answer to the prayer you ignored, Goku replied. He raised his hand toward the Grand Priest. The air in the null realm suddenly grew heavy, shifting from a vacuum to something viscous. You attempted to erase, you attempted to bind, you attempted to execute. Goku listed the actions without anger. Now it is my turn to test the stability of your form. Wah! Goku flicked a finger. It was a simple motion, one he had used 1,000 times to flick away weak energy blasts. But this time, the gesture carried the weight of a collapsing star. A shockwave of transparent crystalline force erupted from his finger. It tore through the space between them, ignoring distance, ignoring resistance. The Grand Priest raised both arms to block, summoning a barrier of absolute divine energy. Crack! The barrier shattered like cheap glass. The force slammed into the Grand Priest. The High Angel was launched backward, tumbling through the void, skipping across the nothingness like a stone on water. He skidded to a halt hundreds of meters away, his feet carving deep trenches into the nothingness before he finally stabilized. Silence returned to the realm. Whis' mouth was slightly open. The Xenos were frozen, their hands covering their mouths. The Grand Priest stood up slowly. He was panting. A thin trickle of violet blood, angel blood, ran down from the corner of his mouth. But it was not the injury that terrified Whis. It was the halo, the light blue halo that floated behind the Grand Priest's head, the symbol of his status, the crown of his existence, was flickering. It buzzed and distorted, blinking in and out of existence like a failing light bulb. Goku lowered his hand. He watched the flickering halo with cold calculation. Your connection to the laws is unstable, Goku observed. You govern based on fear of erasure, but fear is a flaw, and flaws can be corrected. The Grand Priest wiped the blood from his lip. His eyes were no longer just angry. They were hateful. The serene facade was gone, burned away by the humiliation of the blow. He looked at Goku not as a bug to be squashed, but as a rival to be destroyed. You think you have won because you landed a lucky strike? The Grand Priest's voice rose, vibrating with a power that began to shake the distant stars of the multiverse. You are a glitch, Son Goku, a temporary error in the code, and I will not just erase you. I will rewrite the history of your entire race so that you never existed to begin with. Goku tilted his head. The threat meant nothing to him. You cannot rewrite what you cannot read, Goku said. He took another step forward, and the diamond light of his body flared, casting long, sharp shadows across the void. Whis, Goku said without looking at his former teacher. Yes, Whis replied, his voice trembling. Do not interfere, Goku commanded. The calibration of the hierarchy has begun. The violence of the exchange had faded, leaving a silence more terrifying than the clash itself. The Grand Priest hovered in the distance, a bruised deity, his violet eyes burning with a mixture of humiliation and tactical reassessment. He did not attack again immediately. He was an ancient creature, and he understood that attacking a force he did not comprehend was a path to erasure. He watched. He calculated. But it was Whis who moved. The angel of Universe 7 drifted downward, his boots touching the cracked surface of the null realm with a softness that defied the tension in the air. He did not raise his staff. He did not flare his aura. He approached the diamond entity as one would approach a wild animal that had once been a pet, with caution, grief, and a desperate hope for recognition. Goku, Whis said. The name felt heavy on his tongue, a relic from a simpler time. The entity stopped his advance toward the Grand Priest. He turned his head toward Whis. The movement was smooth, hydraulic, lacking the subtle, twitchy micro-movements of a living thing. The diamond facets of his eyes rotated, catching the light of the void, breaking it into cold spectrums of blue and white. "You are obstructing the path of correction, Whis," Goku stated. His voice was flat, the harmonic layering making it sound like a choir of machines. "State your intent." "My intent?" Whis managed a faint, sad smile. He walked closer, stepping within the lethal range of the being's aura. The pressure against his skin was immense, not the heat of battle, but the chill of absolute zero. "My intent is to find my student. I see the shell. I see the power. But I am looking for the spark." Goku stared at him. "Spark is a metaphor. Metaphors are imprecise." "Are they?" Whis stopped mere inches from him. He looked into the crystalline eyes, searching for the black pupils, the warmth, the naive stupidity that had saved the universe more times than wisdom ever had. He found only geometry. "Do you remember Earth? Do you remember the smell of the rain on Mount Paozu? Do you remember the taste of the food?" It was a strange question to ask a godslayer, but it was the only question that mattered. Goku's life had been defined by simple appetites, for battle, for food, for friendship. Goku blinked. The sound was a sharp click. "Sensory data regarding Earth's biosphere is archived," Goku replied. "Nutritional intake protocols are deemed unnecessary for this vessel. The memories are stored." "Stored," Whis repeated, his heart sinking. "Like a file in a library, not felt?" "Feeling requires a biological feedback loop," Goku explained, as if teaching a child basic physics. "I have no biology, therefore I have no feedback. I have only the objective." Whis gripped his staff tighter. "And what of Chi-Chi? What of Gohan and Goten? Are they just data points to you now? Variables in an equation?" The reaction was instantaneous. At the mention of the names, the diamond light surrounding Goku flickered. It wasn't a flare of power, it was a glitch. A jagged gray tremor ran through his left arm. The perfect stillness of his face was disrupted by a twitch beneath the left eye, a ghost of a human expression trying to claw its way through the crystal plating. Goku took a staggering step back. He raised a hand to his head, his fingers scraping against the diamond hair. The harmonic voice distorted, dropping for a split second into the rough, familiar growl of Son Goku. "Chi." The sound was strangled. It was the sound of a man drowning under an ocean of ice, trying to scream before the water filled his lungs. "Goku!" Whis shouted, stepping forward, sensing the breach. "Fight it! The power is rewriting you, but you are the strongest will in the cosmos. Do not let the diamond consume the Saiyan." The glitch spread. The perfect white light of Goku's body began to be stained by streaks of golden energy, the remnant of the Super Saiyan. The two energies clashed violently, the gold trying to burn through the diamond, the chaos of mortality fighting against the order of the angel. For a moment, the diamond eyes cleared. The facets retracted, revealing deep black pupils dilated with confusion and agony. "Whis!" Goku gasped. The voice was his own now, singular and terrified. "It's cold. Everything is so quiet. I can't feel my heart." "I am here," Whis urged, extending a hand. "Take my hand, Goku. We can reverse this. We can—" "No," Goku choked out, stumbling back, clutching his chest. "If I go back, Zeno dies. The core collapses. I have to be this." "You don't have to be a machine," Whis pleaded. "The universe doesn't need a Saiyan anymore, Whis," Goku whispered, a tear forming in his eye. But the tear did not fall. As it left the duct, it crystallized instantly into a diamond bead clattering onto the floor of the void. It needs a wall. The moment of clarity ended as abruptly as it had begun. A blinding pulse of white light erupted from Goku's chest. The golden energy was swallowed whole, devoured by the diamond radiance. The human posture, the hunch of pain, the trembling hands, snapped back into the rigid, perfect, upright stance of the entity. The black pupils vanished, replaced once more by the intricate, unfeeling geometry of the prism. The entity lowered his hand. The twitch was gone. The glitch was patched. Whis stood frozen, his hand still extended toward a friend who was no longer there. He realized then the true horror of the transformation. It wasn't possession, it was suppression. The soul of Son Goku was still in there, screaming, burning, fighting, but the Diamond Angel body was designed to contain it, to use that infinite Saiyan will as a battery to power a system of absolute control. Goku looked at Whis. The recognition was there, but the empathy was dead. "The anomaly has been quarantined," Goku said. The voice was back to the triple harmonic choir. "Emotional interference has been purged, proceeding with the mission." Whis slowly lowered his hand. A cold realization settled in his chest. The Grand Priest had been right about one thing. Goku was a mistake, but not because he was weak. He was a mistake because he was a sacrifice that should never have been accepted. "You are not Goku," Whis whispered, his voice trembling with a rare anger. "You are a cage made of his bones." "I am the Diamond Angel," the entity corrected him, turning away from Whis to face the Grand Priest once more. "And the hierarchy requires a new architect." In the distance, the Grand Priest had finished his calculations. He had watched the momentary glitch, the struggle of the mortal soul, and he smiled. "I see," the Grand Priest said, his voice regaining its velvet smoothness. "He is not stable. The mortal soul rejects the angelic perfection. There is friction." The Grand Priest raised his staff, the blue orb glowing with renewed intensity. "If there is friction," the Grand Priest declared, "then he can be broken." Goku did not respond with words. He simply raised his right arm. The air around him began to warp, the light bending to form a blade of pure, crystallized reality extending from his wrist. He did not look at Whis again. The memory of mortality had been processed, categorized, and deleted to free up processing power for the battle to come. "Correction," Goku said, leveling the blade at the Grand Priest. "The friction is what makes the cut." The clash in the Null Realm was no longer a secret kept within the void. The shockwaves of Goku's existence had begun to bleed through the dimensional barriers, vibrating across the staff of every angel in the multiverse. In Universe 6, Vados paused in the middle of her tea ceremony. The liquid in her cup did not ripple. It froze instantly into a perfect geometric hexagon. She looked up, her usually playful expression hardening into something ancient and fearful. In Universe 11, Margarita dropped her staff. It clattered against the stone floor of Belmod's palace, the orb pulsating with a frantic, static-filled light. Across the 12 universes, the angelic host, the siblings of Whis, the children of the Grand Priest, stopped their duties. They did not speak aloud, but the psychic network that connected them, the silver cord of their lineage, was alive with a panic they had never known. They were watching the Null Realm. They were watching the impossible. "He does not generate energy," Korn's voice echoed in the telepathic web, cold and analytical. "I am reading 0 Chi output, yet the pressure is bending the void." "Look at the coordinates," Vados interjected, her mental voice sharp. "Watch him move. He is not propelling himself." Back in the Null Realm, the phenomenon Vados observed was manifesting in terrifying clarity. Goku moved toward the Grand Priest. To the naked eye, it looked like a high-speed dash, but to the Grand Priest, who could see the underlying code of reality, it was something far more disturbing. Goku's legs moved, but he generated no thrust. He did not push off the ground. Instead, the universe moved around him. When Goku took a step, space-time contracted in front of him and expanded behind him. He remained the absolute center of the coordinate system, and the Null Realm adjusted itself to accommodate his position. He was not traveling through the world. He was scrolling the world past himself. "You are bending the fundamental constants," the Grand Priest spat, retreating again, his halo flickering violently. He fired a barrage of divine energy blasts, each one capable of vaporizing a galaxy. Goku did not dodge, he simply continued his walk. As the blasts approached him, they didn't detonate. They curved. The trajectory of the attacks warped around his body, sliding harmlessly into the void behind him, unable to touch the diamond surface of his skin. It was as if reality itself refused to allow the collision. "I am the axiom," Goku said. The voice was louder now, the harmonic resonance shaking the very floor of the realm. "You cannot subtract from the axiom, Grand Priest. You can only build upon it." The Grand Priest realized with a sinking sensation of dread that he could not win this battle. Not here. Not like this. He had the power to unmake stars, to reverse time, to enforce the will of the Omni King, but his power was based on authority, on the agreement that the universe would obey his commands. Goku was a being who had revoked that agreement. The Grand Priest stopped his retreat. He stood his ground, gripping his staff with both hands. He needed to change the parameters of the conflict. He could not destroy Goku, but he could isolate him. "You speak of axioms, ma frère," the Grand Priest said, his voice regaining a measure of icy composure. "But you forget the highest law, the law of containment." The Grand Priest slammed the butt of his staff into the void. Angelic sealed dimensional lock. A cube of transparent violet energy materialized around Goku. It was the same barrier used to imprison the deadliest cosmic threats, a pocket dimension where time did not flow. Goku stopped. He looked at the walls of the cube. He raised his diamond hand and pressed it against the barrier. The cube began to vibrate. The violet energy screamed as it tried to hold the diamond angel. Cracks appeared on the surface of the energy barrier, spiderwebs of white light spreading rapidly. "It will not hold him," Whis shouted from the sidelines, shielding the Xenos. "Father, stop! If he breaks the seal with force, the shockwave will shatter the null realm." The Grand Priest ignored him. He poured more power into the staff, his eyes glowing with maniacal intensity. "He must be contained. He is a virus in the divine order." Goku pushed harder. The diamond light of his body flared, blindingly bright. The cube groaned. Then Goku stopped pushing. The light faded. The vibration ceased. Goku stood perfectly still inside the cage, his hand resting gently against the violet wall. "You misunderstand," Goku said. The voice transmitted clearly through the barrier. "I am not breaking out because I am trapped. I am waiting." "Waiting for what?" the Grand Priest hissed, sweat beading on his blue forehead. "For you to realize," Goku replied, "that you are on the inside with me." The Grand Priest froze. He looked around. The violet walls of the cube were not just around Goku. They were stretching, curving, encompassing the entire horizon. The Grand Priest looked down. The floor was violet. He looked up. The sky was violet. Goku hadn't broken the barrier, he had inverted it. He had expanded the definition of the cage to include everything except himself. Goku was the only free thing in the multiverse. The Grand Priest, Whis, the Xenos, they were now the ones inside the box. The Grand Priest's staff slipped from his fingers. It clattered to the ground, the sound echoing endlessly in the enclosed space. "He rewrote the topology," the Grand Priest whispered, his knees shaking. "In real time, he reversed the polarity of a divine seal." Goku lowered his hand. The violet walls dissolved into mist, returning reality to its normal state. "The demonstration is concluded," Goku stated. He turned his back on the Grand Priest. It was the ultimate insult. He did not consider the High Angel a threat worth facing anymore. He walked toward the Xenos, who were hovering in silence, their eyes wide with awe. Goku stopped before the Omni Kings. He did not bow this time. He looked at them with that terrifying diamond clarity. "The multiverse is fragile," Goku said to them. "The angels have ruled by keeping you in the dark, by managing your destruction like a gardener pruning a hedge, but the roots are rotting." "Rotting?" the present Xeno whispered. "The Grand Priest makes choices for you," Goku continued. "He decides what is erased. He decides what is saved. That ends today." Goku looked up, his gaze piercing the void, looking toward the distant, unseen palaces of the other universes. "I will return to Universe 7, Goku announced. "I will wait. If the angels attempt to intervene in the natural order again, if you attempt to erase another universe to hide your mistakes—" He paused. The air crystallized. "I will shatter the throne." With that, Goku raised his hand. He did not use instant transmission. He did not fly away. He simply gripped the fabric of space and pulled. The null realm folded. The background blurred. In a single frame of non-motion, Goku was gone. The Grand Priest remained standing in the silence, staring at the empty spot where the Diamond Angel had stood. His breathing was ragged. His halo was dim. He reached down and picked up his staff. His hand was trembling, but his expression was hardening into something darker, something resolute. Whis approached him slowly. "Father," Whis said softly, "what do we do?" The Grand Priest turned. His violet eyes were cold, devoid of the panic from moments before. The shock had passed, replaced by the cold machinery of war. "He is not a mortal anymore, Whis," the Grand Priest said quietly. "He is not a god. He is a systemic failure." The Grand Priest tapped his staff on the ground. A projection appeared, a hologram of all 12 universes. In the center of Universe 7, a red light began to pulse. "He was not reborn," the Grand Priest declared, his voice echoing with the finality of a death sentence. "He was rewritten, and code that cannot be controlled must be deleted." Ending. In the high atmosphere of Earth, above the clouds, a figure materialized. Goku floated in the silence of the stratosphere. The diamond skin of his body reflected the light of the sun and the stars, making him look like a constellation given form. He did not go down to the surface. He did not seek out his family. He knew that his presence, his gravity, his radiation would hurt them. He sat in the lotus position, floating in the thin air. He closed his eyes. He could hear the earth spinning. He could hear the hearts of 7 billion people beating. He could hear Chi-Chi cooking dinner. He could hear Gohan typing at his computer. He wanted to cry. He wanted to go home. But the Diamond Angel could not cry. The tear ducts were sealed with crystal. The heart was a fusion reactor of order. Goku opened his eyes. They were cold, beautiful, and empty. The multiverse continued to crack, but for now he was the glue holding it together. He doesn't break reality. Reality moves for him.